The Tres Corrales was a part of the old McAllen Ranch, right north of McAllen. And it was owned by a petroleum landman, and his name was Hale Schaleben. And he had preserved it. He owned about a quarter of the Tres Corrales, and he had preserved it in its native brush. So it had ocelots on it, it had jaguarundi on it. So from the standpoint of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it was a jewel in the crown, and they had been trying to buy it for years. And he had refused. And in fact, he had said, you need to spend your money somewhere else because I'm going to take care of this and do exactly what you want me to do, and you don't need to buy it. Well, he got into debt. And to this day, I don't know what happened, but he got into debt some way. And so he called him and he said, okay, I'm willing to sell you, part of this ranch, but I only have one condition, and that is I need the money in 90 days. Well, the federal government couldn't do that. And so they called me and they said, this was the Fish and Wildlife Service. And they said, Andy, we really want this tract, but we can't move that fast. Can you do it? So I drove down to the ranch and met with him and made the deal and borrowed $1 million from the national organization. He told me, he said, I'll agree to your appraised value. I'll do whatever you need to do to get this done. But I only have one grandson, and he and I built a blind on that tract. We built a blind on the tract that I'm going to sell you. And I want to be able to hunt deer in that blind with my only grandson. So I go back to Austin and I get all the lawyers together and I say, okay, guys, we got it. But Mr. Schaleben wants to be able to hunt with his grandson in the blind. And they go, no problem. Whitetail deer are a problem. I mean, there's too many of them and they're not endangered. And so what we'll do is we'll enter into a lease with him at closing that will enable him to go in there with his grandson and shoot, 3 deer a year or something. And so I called him and I said, Mr. Schaleben, here's what we're going to do. And he goes, that's perfect. So we signed all the papers and headed to closing. And about a month before the closing, I get a call from one of his adult daughters. And she says, he's had a quadruple bypass and he's in Herman Hospital. And so I got in my car and I drove straight to Houston and went in the hospital room. His wife is sitting at the foot of the bed weeping. He's probably 75 or something, maybe even a little bit older. He's laying there with all these tubes coming out of him. And I reached over and I grabbed his hand and squeezed it. And he opened his eyes and he goes, how's our deal? And he clearly was worried that he was going to end up leaving his wife, to have to handle whatever this problem he'd gotten into. And I assured him that it was going to be okay. I said, Mr. Schaleben, we're all on schedule. Everything's going to be fine. He died. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service calls me and they go, well, we can't do the deer deal. The people in Washington won't let us do the deer lease. I said, what? They said, well, there's endangered species there and this and that. Well, it was clear that they decided to take advantage of the fact that he had died. And by this time I was out $1 million. And so I called his wife and I said, Ms. Schaleben, I just wanted to assure you that we're on schedule, to close, but I can't do the deer lease. And this was the most gracious woman you can imagine. I mean, we became very close up until she died. But she said, the way that I see this is that you're taking advantage of an old woman who has no choice at this point in time. And if I didn't need to do this so bad, I would tell you to take your money and, whatever. And I've never forgotten that. And so part of my problem in those days, or my biggest challenges, were dealing with the bureaucracies, particularly the federal bureaucracy. Secondly, what I learned, and I tell my students about this every semester, is when you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it. If you tell people that you're going to agree to set it up this way, or that you're going to do something, then you need to do it. You don't renege. And I never did a transaction with that guy again. I wouldn't do one with that particular individual because I felt so betrayed.